Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. We're excited that you joined us today. We're going to wait just about 2 minutes to give people an opportunity to move in from the waiting room and to log in. So grab a cup of coffee and we'll be right with you. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Bethany Quinn. I am president of Golden Shovel Agency, and we are so thankful that you've decided to share a little bit of your afternoon with us. I am joined today by Amanda Ellis, who is editor-in-chief of livability.com. For those who have not had the pleasure of meeting Amanda yet, she's absolutely fantastic. I've really enjoyed getting to know her, and their resources are really top notch. So the fact that she is here presenting today, I know that you're going to have fantastic takeaways. Amanda, thank you for joining us.
Yes, super excited to be here, and thanks for that very nice intro.
Of course.
Ready for me to take it away?
I sure am.
All right. Well, hey, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks to Golden Shovel for hosting, and thanks to Bethany for that lovely intro. My name, of course, as Bethany called out, is Amanda Ellis, and I'm with Livability Media. I'm the editor-in-chief of livability.com, which is our content platform that's all about small to mid-sized cities. We're going to be chatting today about all things talent, how your community can really be a talent magnet, marketing your community to talent, and all of those things that are so top of mind for us in the economic development field. If you do think of any questions or comments, be sure to drop those in the chat so we can take some time to address those. We'll leave plenty of time for a little bit of discussion and Q&A as we're wrapping up. If you're not familiar with our work at Livability, we do content marketing, both digitally and also via print publications. And our work is specifically oriented to talent and business attraction and marketing your community to both of those groups. So that's how we really come by our expertise in those topics. I mentioned already livability.com. So that is our content platform all about small to mid-sized cities. And you may have heard of our top 100 best places to live, which I did want to call out because we just launched this for 2025 exactly 2 weeks ago on April 15th. And I know some of you here today, if I had to guess, I bet some of your cities are featured there. So be sure to check that out if you haven't. We only consider small to mid-sized cities for this recognition, which is part of what makes it unique, in addition to a pretty heavy focus that we take on affordability in particular, really honing in on highlighting what we like to call the unsung awesomeness, if you will, of these places. And we do use a data-driven approach to select these cities. So did want to highlight that here since that's very timely. That said, with our time today, we're going to start with some bigger picture context on talent attraction, some of what's going on with the workforce. Then we'll move into some of what communities are doing in terms of talent attraction with some great examples, how to think about marketing your community to talent. And then we'll wrap up with some discussion about what people really want when it comes to where they live, what some of our research has shown on that. And then, as I mentioned, we'll leave plenty of time for some discussion and questions. Jumping right in here, obviously you need people for jobs, and you also need people to have a truly vibrant community, right? You want to be somewhere where people are going, where people want to go versus the opposite, and talent attraction is a big piece of that puzzle. I always like to frame this discussion with some background, as I mentioned, on how we got here, some of the workforce trends, and sort of a how and why has talent attraction become such a big part of our work in economic development. And here's some of what's happening. We've become a little bit less mobile in the US overall, generally in terms of domestic moves. And we're talking like very slowly over the last several decades that we've seen this. There's a new book out actually that covers some of this in more depth and is a really great read if you want to pick it up. But in a nutshell, this author argues that historically, moving from a poorer place to a richer place meant that you could get ahead, right? But now we were in this very different environment where moving often costs more in housing costs than you could gain in income. And he goes in depth about how he feels like we got here, which largely goes back to some of the housing issues that we're seeing in this country. And, if you think about the moment that we're in now, plenty of people, if you're in a home at a lower interest rate, that would have to be some kind of raise, right, to get you to let that go and move to a different city. Even for some, white collar workers that tend to be more highly paid, it's just really been a game changer. Some of what we're seeing there. So we've got this overall reduced mobility, and I just feel like this is really fascinating context for why talent attraction has emerged as a big part of our industry, and also the important role of infrastructure and of housing in all of this, which of course that's also something that we're really seeing emerge as something we're talking a lot about and looking at really closely in our field. And of course, that's not our focus for today, but I did want to talk about it a little bit because it definitely is playing a role in some of what we're seeing. In my mind, we were just really starting to talk more about talent attraction right before the pandemic. Of course, that was also when we were starting to see workforce issues that were in our faces because it was impacting our ability to get things that we wanted, things that we needed. And unfortunately, experts in the space are saying that that might really just be the tip of the iceberg with some of the workforce issues that we're going to see. But along those lines, I wanted to show a short video. This is from Lightcast, a labor market data group in the space that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, that sums up some of these issues we're seeing, some of the demographic issues that are happening alongside that. So we're going to take a quick look here.
Over 5 million workers have left the U.S. labor force since the beginning of 2020, and 80% of them are over the age of 55. At the same time this is happening, the share of prime age men in the labor force is dropping, and we're also seeing a contraction in our younger workforce. What about those younger workers? Many aren't working entry-level jobs anymore, instead waiting to take their first jobs after college. This is leaving many services industries like restaurants and retail understaffed, and occupational groups like skilled trades without a pipeline of talent. It's immigration keeping the U.S. afloat. All growth in the U.S. labor force since 2019 has come from an influx of 3.7 million foreign-born workers, while the U.S. labor force has actually lost a net of 73,000 people. But other countries are running out of people too. The shortages we saw a few years ago happened when the labor force participation rate dropped 1 percentage point. But projections to 2032 suggest it could drop 2 to 3 additional points. All
So kind of a bleak picture there, but you can see how with these things going on with the workforce that he was speaking to. And one of the things that the clip we just got didn't quite get into yet was skills gaps. So where the people you have, the skills they have aren't necessarily matching up with the skills you need for the jobs that you need the very most. And overall, you can see why, in light of this, a lot of places are really trying to make sure that they have enough workers, get that pipeline in place, make sure that they are truly a good place to live and that they're viewed as a good place to live, that they're promoting themselves in that way so that they can really be competitive for people as we head into some of these trends. And communities, of course, are mainly tackling these talent issues, whether it's growing the workforce in general, closing that skills gap, all of that good stuff. It's really through these two main ways, right? So the first is local workforce development efforts, which of course are also really important, but also talent attraction. And that, of course, is our focus for what we're going to be chatting more about today. And that leads us to sort of what I like to think of as our literature review portion of this session, if you will. We're going to cover a little bit of kind of all the different buckets and approaches here in terms of how we're seeing communities recruit talent, like what kinds of programs that we're seeing. And on each of these upcoming sections, I've got a few examples linked of communities that are engaging in these types of things. If you want to jot those down for further reading, or I can give you access to our slides from today because they are all linked. But before I delve into these, here's just some questions to keep in mind as you think through, what makes sense to replicate in your community, what makes the most sense for you to engage in this area as you're crafting your strategy. Of course, what's special about your community, what really sets you apart, makes you different. What types of workers do you want to recruit? Is there a certain persona of the type of group that you want to grow in your community, or where you're really seeing a gap in terms of the types of employees that are needed? Budget, of course, always a fun one, but what does that look like in terms of what you have to put into your strategy? How can you add personal touches to your campaign? And you'll see more what I mean as I go into some of these examples of how communities are really making more of a personal connection in some ways with the talent they want to reach. And of course, as we touched on a few minutes ago, do you have the infrastructure for more people? Again, not necessarily our focus, but definitely something to think about in terms of housing and all of those things that you need as a community to grow in this way. All right, diving into these, starting with targeting boomerangs. So these are people who used to live in your community who don't anymore. Usually it's people who grew up there and have a connection in that way. Greensboro, North Carolina has done a really interesting campaign, an ongoing campaign to reach these people. They even targeted local grandparents with the ad like the one here on my slide, which is one of my favorites. Missing your grandchildren, we can help them move back. But they've seen good results targeting people who already have a connection to their community. They've done this both digitally and also through people who are already there through their personal connections and outreach. And they've seen a couple hundred relocations back to town by using this focus. And I mentioned at the top that we do a lot of our own research at Livability here and periodically, looking at where people are going, why they're making those relocation decisions, what they're looking for with whether a place would be a good fit. And, that sense of personal connection in terms of being close to family, being close to loved ones is one that we see being really important when people are making these decisions. And so I think this is an interesting way to kind of play on something that we do know is important to people. So anybody's guess on how this might look in light of some of what's happened this year so far, but we have seen in recent years communities looking at how being more open to immigrants, foreign-born workers, even refugees can give their workforce a boost. Really interesting case study linked up here from Brattleboro, Vermont, on how they've placed refugees from a couple different specific countries, and it's really given them a much needed population boost. Vermont is one of the top 5 least populated states in the country, and they've seen a lot of outmigration, just really looking at how to grow their working age population. And this is one way that they've successfully been able to do that. Overall, foreign-born workers have been a big part of our workforce for a while now and keeping things running. So that's all I'm going to say on this. Anybody's guess how some of this is going to shake out with some of what we're seeing with the current administration, but it is something that some communities have successfully focused on from a talent attraction standpoint in a different way than we normally are thinking about it. A little more retention focused here, but your college students can be a big opportunity. This is that age where you're getting ready to start your life. And with some intentionality around it, you can help these people stay in your area versus going somewhere else or going back to where they're from. Internships, of course, are huge for this, and just really helping these young people build their professional networks, those relationships that really make you feel anchored in a place. And if you think about it, especially for traditional university students, a lot of times they're spending most of their time on campus or on school activities, and they're not really getting that true sense of what it would be like to live in your community as, a real grown-up, as a young professional. And so we have seen communities also craft programs around helping them get that exposure, get to know the community in that way, hearing from locals about different aspects of living there, why they appreciate it. But these students just starting to enter the workforce can be a really key group to target with your talent strategies. This one you've probably heard of, but offering some sort of incentive to recruit people. A lot of times these are focused on remote workers to move. Tulsa Remote is probably the most well-known example of this. So they pay people $10,000 to give living in Tulsa a try. And we've seen a lot of places ranging in size create their own version of these incentive programs. If you're curious what some of these look like, Make My Move is a site that kind of aggregates all of these available across the country. And it's interesting to see what some groups are doing. Bottom line, though, I would say intentionality is so important on this one. And I did want to show a short clip of someone talking about their Tulsa Remote experience.
I got paid $10,000 to move to Tulsa, Oklahoma. So I moved there because I was accepted into Tulsa Remote, a program that aims to bring diverse and remote working talent to the state of Oklahoma. A major benefit of being in a program like Tulsa Remote is the access you get to a community of fellow transplants. Even though I think Tulsa is a great up-and-coming city, I didn't stay after my year was through. Tulsa's got a revitalized downtown core, and there are things to do, but it's mostly a quiet suburban town. Also, in spite of making friends, volunteering, and attending events, I never was really able to connect to the city. So if you're thinking about applying to Tulsa Remote, let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to help in the comments.
So I show that because I think it really highlights that these incentives can help people make the leap. But again, it's just one tool in your talent attraction toolbox, right? So you want to make sure that beyond that, you're really helping people build that sense of community and connection, which is interesting because in that clip, he did talk about making that effort and just not ending up connecting the dots for him. But yeah, this can be something to get on people's radar. But again, just one tool in there. But that sense of connection that we mentioned is a good lead into our next couple of points here on really helping people find that. There's really only one community I'm aware of tapping into this one, but I thought it was a great idea, and that is actually hosting people for a visit who are interested in relocating. So this group out of Traverse City, Michigan, they were just on our podcast, Inside America's Best Cities, where we talk about all kinds of economic development and talent topics. But they host an annual visit weekend. They call it their Northern Explorers Weekend every year in the fall, and they host 10 to 15 people that they choose through an application process who are interested in relocating there. And they promote these folks to their local employers, and the way the weekend works is sort of a long weekend where they do some networking program on like a Friday and a Monday, and then also have some free time over the weekend to just get oriented to the community, engage in whatever sounds fun to them. And they also get paired up with a local buddy who helps with their plans, helps them get oriented and says, hey, you should meet this person, or have you looked at this? So this is not a very big community. And another thing I thought was really interesting about it is it's not like an all expenses paid type situation for the participants. So they do raise some sponsorship dollars to put this on, but the amount varies year to year. So sometimes they use some of that for a stipend, but ultimately these visitors are investing in the visit themselves, at least in some capacity. So I think that helps ensure they get serious inquiries, people who are genuinely interested. And they've seen about half of their visitors through this program that they've done for a few years now actually make the move. So I like that they were doing something different here. Something else we're seeing is more hands-on support for job seekers. So instead of just linking out to job boards or Indeed or whatever from your platforms, doing a little bit more hand-holding. So a couple examples of this on the Northwest Arkansas talent site, they have a place where you can upload your resume, some info about what you're looking for, and they offer to make warm introductions to applicable employers. The Kansas City talent site, which is what's shown here, they publicly list their newest candidates interested in relocating. You can click to see their resume. So I like that that's not gate kept at all. It's just really easily out there for employers. And another interesting one is the state of South Dakota has a whole team of job advisors. So their whole job is just to be one-on-one support for people trying to find their next job and make that move to South Dakota. And they really support people in a more one-on-one way. So, I like the personalized feel of this approach because having a job and knowing how that part of your financial picture is going to shake out is a pretty key aspect for most people of being able to move to a new city, and helping people do that, and also helping your employers understand why going the extra mile for a non-local candidate can be a really good thing. Good stuff here. Again, community, we've talked about that a few times, but really helping people cultivate that. Networking programs for new residents are another big one here. I'm based in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and our group is called Chattanoogies for people new to the community. So I always love seeing the cute names that communities really bring in their personality with these things. And also community influencer programs are another approach to this community feel and helping people build those relationships. This example, these are the Indie-fluencers out of Indianapolis. So if you were interested in relocating there, you can go on their web presence for this, find someone that aligns with your interests or the phase of life that you're in to just be sort of that first connection, give you advice on the local area, tell their story about how they ended up there and whether they think it would be a good fit for you, and just being able to build those connections with people that, we all know are so important in enjoying living somewhere and looking at whether something is really for you. So we've talked through a lot of the different strategies and kind of buckets of what communities are doing. And I want to add two key takeaways based on all of those. And the first is, more often than not, we see a lot of these efforts targeting more like white collar workers or remote workers, seems to be how a lot of talent attraction has been oriented so far. And I believe there's a real opportunity here to stand out by targeting skilled workers. We've done some research on that at Livability and do see that these workers would be receptive to that. And we've also done some research targeting specifically healthcare workers and seen the same thing. I know those are two groups of skills that a lot of communities would like to grow. And so I see that as a real opportunity targeting specifically some of those groups with incentives or programs or whatever it is that you're working on. And the second takeaway here is what all of these strategies ultimately have in common is marketing. We love to say at Livability that your talent recruitment strategy is really a marketing strategy, right? Because if no one's aware of what you're doing, it doesn't really matter, right? Marketing is really the foundation of talent attraction, promoting your community, your quality of life, with or without some of the fancier programs that we've talked about so far layered over the top of those marketing efforts. But of these programs that we've talked about, social media targeting, working with, marketing service providers in our space, traditional PR, all of these tactics are really what's driving these and helping them reach their intended audiences. We also see plenty of communities putting their focus on talent attraction focused websites, which I'm sure some of you here today have engaged in, kind of having that separate web presence for people who might be thinking about relocating that would have everything you would want to know in one place. Content marketing, like what we do at Livability, which we're going to talk a little bit more about, and other marketing focused efforts to draw talent. And so we see these really being the foundation of a lot of the programs we've talked about and really helping to drive them and drive their results. This is where we know people are getting information about communities and really helpful when thinking about where you should put your effort from a marketing standpoint, which is largely these digital components. We see internet research showing up here, social media showing up here, rankings and media coverage, thinking about our top 100 ranking that we talked about at the top of this presentation. And I find it helpful to think about these digital components in two different ways as you're thinking through your strategy. The first is your community's digital front door. And all I mean by that digital front door is what are all the things that can be found like on the first page or two of Google when people are looking for information about your place. So that's everything from your website to media placements about your community, the AI summary that we see now that kind of takes into account all of these high-ranking search items, and thinking about how you can use the tools available to you to shape this digital front door into the narrative that you would want people to see if they were looking for information about your place for the first time and didn't really know a lot about it. The second way I like to think of these marketing components is as this mix of your owned, earned, and paid media. If you've studied marketing in any official capacity, you've probably seen a diagram like this before, but quick example of each of these, your owned media is your platforms that belong to you. So like your website, your social platforms, etc. Paid, of course, is any type of advertising that you might be engaged in. And then your earned media is that sweet spot where you have not necessarily control, but definitely some influence, and media coverage is going to be the most, typically the biggest example of that. But thinking about the level of control that you have over each of these. So of course you control the messaging when it comes to channels you own, but often what others say about you is really especially important, right? And what really gives you that increased exposure. So that's where that earned media category can be really key when you think about, PR work, working with influencers, getting on those like rankings lists that we just talked about. And thinking about prospective talent and putting yourself in their shoes, you'd probably want some third-party information, right, on somewhere you were thinking of moving to. So not just like what the chamber website says or the EDO website says, but what else is out there, and really being able to feel like you were getting the real scoop. And that's really where our work at Livability comes into this. We're reaching potential relocators and talent with our best places lists and content about small to mid-sized cities. And branded content, like what we do for a lot of our communities, is a great way to really capture the benefits of all three of these digital marketing categories that we just talked about. It's an alternative to traditional advertising, but also giving you that control over the messaging, really being able to tell that story the way that you want to tell it, but having the look of earned media and ranking really highly in search. So when we talked about the digital front door, helping to ensure that those pieces of your story that you really want to tell are the top line items there. So the work that we're doing really bridges a lot of what we've just talked about in terms of marketing to talent. Kind of my last portion for today, I want to wrap up our time sharing some of the livability components that we know are resonating with people, since understanding what's going to resonate with people, what's important to them, is important in crafting your talent recruitment messaging and your strategy. So we've done a lot of our own research on this in different iterations over the years. And one thing I always like to highlight is we know that work is really important in terms of where we end up living, but it's not the sole driver, and it's not the only thing people are thinking about. And I'm sure even if you think about your own life, you can see this reflected. It's an important piece, but it's not the only thing. So what that really means is you're not just marketing job opportunities. That's never the case, but really your quality of life and how people can have not just a good job in your community, or not just a well-paying job, but a really high quality of life and somewhere that they're really going to enjoy living and connect to. In one of our surveys, we showed that 73% of respondents said that they found work where they were already living versus 20% who came to that city for a job, which gives you an idea. Obviously, that 20% of people who came for a certain job is not a nothing number, like it's a solid number, but you can see that also there were so many people that, came there because, some of the other top reasons we see of, kind of how we end up where we are is, you went to school there, you had family there, you just liked it and wanted to go somewhere for a fresh start. So many other reasons that we see besides just the job piece. Some of the other top line items that people really care about when it comes to, deciding whether a place would be a good fit for them, affordability and cost of living is always, at the top or near the top. How is this going to impact my finances? Weather and climate is also a big one. People looking at whether that's going to fit their preferences, kind of going along with that affordability point. How much living space can you get for your money? What does that look like? And we already mentioned, proximity to family is also a big one, proximity to family and loved ones. And of course, those quality of life pieces, as we were just highlighting, what is my life going to be like here? What's there to do? Am I going to enjoy it? And two things I would also add in under this category that we see come up a lot, traffic and how easy it is to get around, and also safety and what those numbers look like are another big thing that people are thinking about there. These are some street interviews that we've done. We do a street interview series at Livability where we ask people on the street in different cities what they love about where they live. And you can hear some of those things that I just talked about highlighted in some of these responses. These particular interviews were captured in Chattanooga, where I'm based, and also in Birmingham, Alabama. But just something fun to get you thinking about what's great about where you live and how that might align with some of what people are commenting on here.
I love the Southern hospitality. When you're growing a business or when you're just new to a city, a lot of people are afraid to meet new people. Chattanooga brings you in like you're their own. So,
and for one, the traffic is not as bad as some cities in some states. So it's easy, I can live, work, and play right here in my town. And that's why I haven't moved. It's just easy living.
It's on the way to everywhere, which is what I like about Chattanooga. We're only 2 hours from Atlanta, or an hour and a half. We're not far from Nashville, not far from Knoxville or Birmingham. And now it's even easier to be on the way to everywhere because our airport is expanding.
I love the cost of living. Birmingham is completely different from where I'm originally from, and the pace of life is just so much slower, and people are just so friendly here.
But there's always something free to do. There's a lot of free attractions to be able to attend and go to.
I really love having a smaller circle and running into people, whether it be walking down the street on my way to lunch or at a work event, or on just a random Saturday at the farmer's market.
Here people say hi to you, and they really take the time to really get to know you, like in the big city where everybody is just eager to get about their day, get to the next thing, and move on.
And with that, we're going to close so we have plenty of time for some discussion and questions. But lastly, I just want to mention our Let's Talk Talent monthly newsletter that we do at Livability. This covers trends in talent attraction, talent retention from an economic development slant. So similar to a lot of what we've talked about here today. And the QR code here will let you sign up for that if that's something you'd like to stay in the loop on. We also do an industry podcast that I mentioned, relocation research that I've talked about some of our findings today. And this newsletters are a great way to stay up to date on all of those things. But with that, thank you. And I'm going to grab the Canva link. I have a public view Canva link for these slides. That way you'll have that if you want to follow through on any of these links, on any of those program examples or any of that. And while I'm doing that, feel free, I guess, to unmute or use the chat. I'll let Bethany guide you through that while I grab our link.
Yeah, and we do have some people that already put some comments in. I know Karen said, yes, please send me the slides, very valuable information. So thank you, Karen. And earlier I did see that there was a participant who had raised their hand. I'm going to see if I can find you.
It's hard to track that stuff while you're talking.
I know. I didn't want to interrupt you. I'm so sorry. Now, whoever it was, I don't see your hand now. So feel free to add your comment to the Q&A or raise your hand again, and we're going to keep an eye out on that.
And I did drop that link in the chat, so you should be able to see all of the slides there and access any of those links that way.
Perfect. I am going to share that with everyone. And, I love how you gave so many fantastic examples of the work being done in communities. Those on the street interviews, those were really fun.
They are really fun.
I like that approach.
Yeah, those were all in the hot summertime last summer in the South. So I was like, people must really want to share something about their place that they're going to stand out here with me in the sun.
Right. Yeah, and they did. They had great things to say. So very cool idea. I do see someone put in that the chat says it's disabled. So go ahead and just put your questions, I guess, in the Q&A field instead. We can go ahead and answer them that way. Everybody should have a little button at the bottom of their screen that has a question mark in it. And one thing, obviously, I do want to point out while everyone's doing that is Golden Shovel and Livability work very well together. We have a lot of shared clients. As Amanda said, your website is your front door. So if yours does not create a good impression, time for a paint job. Golden Shovel will be happy to take care of that for you. And of course, we help our clients with content and social media. But what I really like is the way that Livability is able to amplify messages for communities is so fantastic. And I can't wait to go through your list of best places to live. I enjoy reading that every year.
Yes, that would actually be a good, well, it's linked in my slides if we ever got those to go through on the chat.
Yeah, it should be in the chat. So hopefully everyone can see it in the chat. But we will also go ahead and email that out to everyone in our follow-up. So that's another way that you can have access to it. And I see some thumbs up. So I know the emojis are working, guys. Good.
Yeah, I see a floating like button, so that's good.
I like it. All right. Let me see if Anyone? Oh, I see another emoji. You guys are making us happy.
That's really fun.
I don't see anyone else's hands though. So I think what we will do is we'll just go ahead and send out this recording. We'll send out the link to the presentation. Hopefully all of you saw the link in the chat as well. But I am gonna go ahead and see if I can paste it into the Q&A too, just so you have a third way to do it. I'm filling in for our tech guy today, Victor. He's more than a tech guy, a director of communications, but he's a lot better at this than I am, you guys. So thank you for bearing with me as I try to give you guys this link. Bottom line is, I'm pretty sure you're going to get it in the follow-up email at this point.
He
But
picked a
thanks, Amanda.
strategic time to be gone to make sure that you were
Yeah.
really good at this.
Yeah, exactly. Shows me what I need to be cross-trained in. But anyway, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Amanda, for being here. Great information today. As our attendees have given their hand claps, I know they enjoyed it as well. So thank you, thank you. We will be sending a follow-up to everyone who attended today.
Thanks so much, everyone. Hope everybody has a great rest of their day.
Thanks, Amanda.